Good morning, Life Point Crossing. How are you doing? I am so glad you're here. My name's Ross. Welcome back to this is week 4 of How Not to Have a Conversation. I hope for you, and I think it's been good and helpful so far. We learned week 1, of course, that you don't have to step up to every challenge, arguing with someone who isn't going to listen, or even worse, an online bot that isn't even real. There is just no benefit to that. Week 2, we learned that you guys, love and truth. You can't just pick one. You got to bring both of your buddies to every conversation you have. Last week, if you were here, we saw that what you have to hear is at least as important, probably more important than what you have to say. I hope it's been good, and I hope the way we structured this is a little bit fun and a little bit not threatening, right? Like here are all the examples of what not to do. Other people are so foolish, ha ha, right? And so maybe, that makes it less threatening and you can kind of let it in a little bit and is easier to digest and apply. But it is inescapably kind of negative. I want to be positive. And so it is with great delight that we begin today with a story that is absurdly positive. And it wasn't even a conversation exactly, but it points directly to the dynamic that we're going to be looking at today that destroys conversations and too often even entire relationships. And it's from a time that, if memory serves, Laura and Charles and I were visiting some of my family, my mom's family in Southern California, LA area. And this involves my Aunt Joy. And Joy has managed to live a life that is both at the same time very, very simple and also quite exotic. Her parents, my grandparents, gave the majority of their lives to serving God and people as missionaries in Thailand. My mom actually was born in Thailand and largely raised in Southeast Asia. My Aunt Joy also then gave the majority of her adult life to serve God and people as a missionary in Thailand. Now, she spent plenty of time, both as a child and as an adult, in the United States, so she kind of looks like a normal American. She speaks like any normal American. There's no accent or anything like that, but she has lived the majority of her life in a place that's very, very far away and very, very different. So, as her parents, my grandparents, were aging and beginning to have a lot of medical issues, and she was herself approaching retirement age, she made the decision to relocate to Los Angeles area to help out with them. They're past now, but they weren't at this time. And so she did that. She moved, she bought, rented an apartment, bought a car, and started living in Southern California. Shortly thereafter, for whatever reason I don't remember, but our family was visiting there, and there was one time in particular that stands out so delightfully to me in my mind is Laura, Charles, and I were riding in the car that she was driving, and it was at night. We were going back from wherever we were going. We were going to, she was dropping us off wherever we were sleeping, at her place or somewhere else, I don't remember. But it was immediately obvious to us that she was still kind of in the feeling out stage of how it is to drive in North America. I don't know what her transportation situation was like in Thailand, if she drove or walked everywhere or public transport. I don't know, but she was struggling a little bit and kind of confusing some of the other drivers. It seemed very evident to us. And here's the other element that makes the story possible is my Aunt Joy is a very, very verbal person. Somebody like myself, my internal monologue remains mostly internal. Somebody like her, and somebody like this, maybe you are somebody like this, her internal monologue comes right out on a moment-by-moment basis. You know what she's thinking because she's going to say it, and she's going to tell you out loud. So we knew what the situation was because she told us when we began. She's like, okay, well, I've never driven down this road at night before. And then whatever happened, happened. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was some very obvious driving error. It wasn't dangerous. There was no accident. It wasn't a busy road, but it was LA. There were other cars around. And so I don't know if she was driving on the center line or if she was taking up 2 lanes or what, but something like that. And I remember sitting there and being absolutely mortified thinking of the car behind us because I cannot stand it when there's a driver that can't get their act together. And I'll go way out of my way to try and not be sure I'm not being that person to someone else, not even because I'm such a great guy, but because I become a rage-filled monster when somebody else does it to me. I can't stand it. And so I'm sitting there thinking, oh no, I know exactly what's going on in that car behind us. They hate us. They are calling down every curse that they could ever think of or imagine or remember on us and our children and our children's children. They hate us. That's what I thought. Well, here's what my Aunt Joy was thinking, and I know because she said, well, I suppose the car behind us is just thinking that we probably haven't driven down this road in the dark before. We did not necessarily burst out laughing, but I think we all kind of thought, Joy, I'm not really sure that that's what they're thinking. And in point of fact, we don't know what they were thinking because we don't know who it was or what they were doing. There was no real feedback. They didn't honk angrily at us, nor did they flag us down to offer us some tips for driving down the road for the first time at the night. So we don't know, but I'm really quite certain, and to this day, I certainly believe that I'm right. I knew what they were thinking. I think they were very, very irritated. Here's why I'm so confident of that, is because if it had been me, I would have been very irritated. My Aunt Joy, though, well, she also believed she knew what they were thinking, and she believed that they were being very, very gracious in their thoughts to her. And here's why she believed that. It's the exact same reason. It's because if she had been in the car behind this car, she would have, in fact, been very, very gracious to them in her thoughts. Isn't that interesting? We both believed that we knew exactly what was going on in the mind of this random stranger behind us, but really all we knew is how we would think or act or react if we were the ones in their situation. So that told us, in fact, absolutely nothing about what was going on in the mind of the people behind us, but it told us a lot about how we think and work and operate. Isn't that real and true and pretty interesting? And so for today, here is a very, very well-known and often hugely misunderstood and misapplied teaching of Jesus. In fact, this is probably the most referenced thing that Jesus has ever said or ever recorded in Scripture, although usually, I think, in ways that are very, very different from what Jesus meant. But if you've never been in church before, if you have never cracked open a Bible in your life, you have heard this referenced before. This will be at least somewhat familiar to you. It's from Matthew 7, and he says, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged." Now, usually when somebody references that, that's somebody who's saying that someone else is wrong because they told them they were wrong, and it's wrong to tell someone they're wrong, and so immediately that makes no sense and is very confusing. But Jesus, of course, keeps talking, and it starts to make a lot more sense. Here's what he says. He says, "Why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your own eye, when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite. First, get rid of the log in your own eye. Then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye." And so clearly enough, this is not suggesting that somehow you can't ever judge anything to be right or wrong or good or bad. But what Jesus is saying as baseline is really fairly simple. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't be mad at your neighbor for mowing at 8 a.m. when you are having a loud party until 3. You get rid of the log in your own eye. That hangover, you did that to yourself. Don't be all whining about how, all rich people are so greedy when you spend all of your money on yourself and every one of us is in the top 5% of wage earners in the world. That's really kind of not very self-aware and a little bit gross. Now, work on that log in your own eye. Don't criticize the professional coach and say he doesn't know he doesn't understand the game when your peewee team is under 500. Just have some self-awareness, right? But it is always so much easier to criticize and point a finger at somebody else than it is to get your own house in order. Isn't that true? Of course, that's absolutely true. So don't tell Apple they don't know how to run a business when your personal family budget is a total mess. Have some self-awareness And don't excuse or ignore the junk in your own life while you're trying to get all huffy about whatever's going on in somebody else. Fairly simple. Well, here's where what Jesus says, though, gets a little bit more interesting, and I think a little bit more insightful and quite a bit more profound, is when we consider what modern psychologists come to call projection. Now, that word has been around for about 100 years, but the phenomenon has been around clearly at least since the time of Jesus, and I suspect about as long as human beings have. And it's a little bit of a strange word, but effectively what it means is that when you see something that's negative in somebody else, really it's very likely that what you're seeing is actually a projection of yourself. It's really in you and not on them. It's as though I am sort of like the projector in the film, and then the other person is the screen on which I see something that's really negative and something that I really react strongly against. But it's not even really in them. It's really just myself that I'm seeing. And we all think, oh yeah, I hate it when people do that. That's the worst, and I would never, ever do that, right? But like so many of these things, it is so difficult to recognize when we're doing it, and we all do this on some level all the time. This is why I was so sure that I knew what the people in the car behind my Aunt Joy were thinking. And although we'll never know, I'm still convinced that I'm right, but we really don't know. But it's because that's what I would have been thinking. That was enlightening about me, not really them. And this is why my Aunt Joy was so sure that she knew what they were thinking, is because it's what she would have been thinking. That really gave us insight into her, not the other people that we'd never even met. Because we can't read minds. We don't know what anybody else is thinking or why they necessarily would have said or done or believed whatever it is that they said or did or believed. What we're seeing so often is actually a projection of ourselves, what I would be thinking if I were them, or what my motivation would be if I were them. So especially when this is bad or wrong, right, which is really the only times that it's a problem, but especially when it's bad or wrong, the flaw or the speck that I think I see in somebody else, really what that is I'm just not able to see past the much bigger issue that's actually, in fact, in me. And so when we're in a conversation, here's what not to do, is don't try and read somebody's mind. Don't think that you know or understand exactly what they're thinking and why they said that, why they did that, why they believe that, especially when it's negative. I love the example of my Aunt Joy because it's just so beautiful. Maybe a scooch naive, but man, couldn't we all stand to be a little bit more of that kind of just beautifully, graciously naive? But especially when it's negative, and almost all the time that it's negative, this is something that you're seeing in the other person, but it's really not there, or it isn't fair, and this destroys potentially profitable conversations, or too often even entire relationships. A couple simple examples. Since I moved to Missouri almost 2 years ago, I have noticed that a lot of people here drive big trucks. Well, here's a social media post that I came across some time ago, and it says, here are two trucks. One was designed, you can see one of them's big, one of them's little. One was designed to be practical for average suburban folks to carry stuff on a regular basis. The other was designed to make guys feel like they are tough and rule the road. Does not even seem to deal with the possibility of what about women who drive big trucks, but we're not, I guess, even going to go that far for today. But it is, I suppose, it's between possible and probable that there may be some people, I guess, who get a big truck to feel tough. But it's really interesting, isn't it, that the person who wrote this is not the person who bought the big truck. So really, who does this tell us about? Does this tell us about the person who's driving the big truck? Not at all. What this tells us about is the person who put this caption on the picture. What it says is that if they were to buy a big truck, it would be because they wanted to feel tough and feel like they ruled the road. This really tells us about them. It doesn't tell us anything about the person who actually did buy the big truck. Maybe they tow a horse trailer and you can't do that with a Ranger. Maybe they live on a driveway that's a quarter-mile long, unpaved, and it gets muddy or doesn't get plowed in the winter. I don't know. Maybe there are 1,000 reasons to buy a big truck that I would never think of because I'm not particularly a truck guy. I've never really even thought about buying a big truck like that. But I'll say this, and I think this is interesting. I say that as a person who, if I can admit this to you, I kind of wish that I looked a little tougher than I do. I knew you would laugh at that, and I know why it's funny, and I'm not particularly pleased by it, but I'm willing to take the hit, hopefully to make the point and help point us all forward. But yes, I never in my mind would it cross my mind to correlate a level of toughness with the vehicle that someone drives. That doesn't make any sense. But guess who just did correlate a level of toughness with the vehicle that someone drives? Well, not the person who bought the big truck, but whoever put the caption on this picture. Isn't that interesting? It's their own log that they're seeing. Hey, have any of you maybe ever said or heard somebody say or thought to yourself, well, you know what, she only wears those jeans because she thinks they make her look skinny, or she just dresses like that because she's trying to show off or whatever? Well, I don't know. I guess maybe. But here's really what you just told us is that you have on your mind trying to look a certain way. Now, the person you're talking about, maybe that's what they're doing, maybe not. I don't know. Really could be anything. We don't know anything about them. But there's a pretty good chance you're the one who's obsessed with looking a certain way because that just came right on up out of your own mouth. You're not somehow seeing right through somebody else. What you're seeing is that projection or sort of reflection of yourself in them. And hopefully those are relatively non-threatening examples of how this works, unless the person who put the caption on the truck photo happens to be here, in which case I'm glad you're here. Pretty coincidental, and we'll see how that goes, but glad you're here. Hopefully this will be helpful for all of us. But when you're in a conversation, either in person or online, right, way too often we think we understand what's going on with somebody else or the other person. We really just don't. Here are the telltale signs. Is if you think something like, well, you know what, well, you're just saying that because, and then you fill in the blank, especially with something negative. Okay, or well, you just think that because, fill in the blank, especially if it's something negative, because you don't know about them and their mind and how they work. You know yourself in your own mind. You know what you would be doing or why you would have said that or why you would think that. But this is not you seeing clearly so that you can help take the speck out of your friend's eye. This is you not being able to see past the log in your own eye. So here's how to have a conversation. There are at least two very, very easy and tremendously more beneficial alternatives that are more constructive and more fair. One of them is if you have the opportunity or it matters whether you think you know what somebody's thinking or you don't, here's what you can do is just ask them. That's simple enough. Okay, and then, though, make sure you get all the way through. Just believe what they say. Because otherwise we still get to this, he says that he just likes the truck because he likes to be able to see over the other cars, but we all know it's just because he feels small and he has to compensate. It's so stupid. Like, well, no, this is ridiculous. Now what you're doing, now you just projected both why he has the truck and a penchant for not telling the truth. This is really revealing some very, very ugly things in our own hearts when we do that. So just ask them and then assume that they're telling the truth. This is so much better. Or if you don't have the opportunity or for whatever reason it doesn't happen, you can do this. Just assume the best, right? And not the worst. Because here's what happens is so much of the time that we do this, okay, at least the times when it's a problem, is when we're assuming the worst. And we're wrong so much more than we would believe or realize. And so now we're actually judging somebody for something that not only is it not even there in them, it actually is the reflection of ourselves and our own hearts. This is exactly what Jesus is saying to not do. So you can make a habit of just saying, well, I don't know, but probably there's a reason. I hope it's a good one. What does this really vague social media post mean? Well, it's vague. I don't know. I must have had a reason. I hope it's a good one. Why do people believe differently than I do politically? Here's probably what it's not. It's probably not that people who believe differently than you are terrible, evil people that are trying to propagate evil in the world. And that people who believe like you do are good and wonderful and noble and fighting for what's right. It's probably not that. But when we believe that about the other person, well, you can see how now there's no possible way to have any sort of a conversation. How do things get any better if you can't even have a conversation? And frankly, I kind of feel like that's about where our society is on a lot of those things. So circle back just for a moment here to what Jesus said in the first couple verses here. Look at this. It says, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged, for you will be treated as you treat others." The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. So here's a clear question. How would you like to be judged? By what standard would you like to be judged? Well, we said a few minutes ago that it's very, very easy for all of us to ignore or excuse the junk in our own lives, right? And that's true, but really, seriously, even when it's something that really is wrong or bad on whatever level, to be honest, I think, I'm not mad at you most of the time. I think we come by that really very honestly, or at least mostly honestly. Because isn't this true? Whatever it is in your life, you understand all of the nuance and all of the circumstance and the situation and the bigger picture. And so you think, you know what, if other people just understood like I did, then they would be able to understand. Maybe from the outside, all you see is I'm really grouchy. Well, you know what? I have 3 kids under age 5. My spouse just got laid off, so I am not sleeping at night. I'm really nervous about where we're going to go if we get evicted from our apartment. And so I'm sorry if I was a little short with you, but my life is pretty hard right now. And I think it's not that I just love being grouchy, right? When that's you, well, you don't love being grouchy, but you understand. Maybe you think, it's true, I've really been drinking too much. But my mom just got a really bad diagnosis, and now my siblings and I are fighting about what to do with her and where she's going to go, or do we put her in a home? There don't seem to be any good options. And so maybe it's not the best way, but this is the only way I know to find anything that feels like peace right now. And if you knew, if you understood, if you were in my shoes, you would do a whole lot more understanding and a whole lot less judging. You know what? That's all of us. So here's just what we do, is bring some of that same graciousness that you extend to yourself to whoever it is that you're talking to. Right? When you hear something that you don't immediately agree with or understand, you don't jump to, oh yeah, okay, well I know what you're thinking. You're just saying that because, no, just go with, oh really, why would you say that? Why do you believe that? Why is that? Because you don't know why unless they tell you. Or failing that opportunity, you just get in the habit of saying, well, I don't know, that must be a reason. It's probably a good reason. To just assume the best and not the worst, especially if you know you have a tendency to assume something negative or devious in the other person. You just ask them, or if you can't, you just go with, well, you know what? I don't know, but if I speculate, I am for sure going to be wrong. So I'll just assume the best. These will help you to see past the log that, you guys, I know, right? But this is me too. You don't even realize that you have in your eye. And it will make you more gracious. It will make you more understanding. It will make you more Christ-like. And we will be having much, much, much better conversations. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for Jesus, who so long before whatever we consider modern psychology or anything else like that, laid bare our hearts before us in a way that nobody has been able to do in that sort of fashion before or since. Something that really only the one who created us would be able to do or understand on that level. Father, help us to take to heart his words and what he has to say, to point us forward and to follow it when probably some of us have spent decades developing habits of doing the opposite. But we realize that not only is it unhelpful and destructive to our own peace and to the relationships and conversations with people around us, but it is walking away from who you've created us to be and how you've created us to interact with the other people around us that you love so desperately that Jesus died for. I'm still praying if you're here today and maybe you've never taken that first step to connect with God through Jesus Christ. Like, you know that you do have some, if there's specks in your eye or logs in your eye, you don't even know, it doesn't even matter, but we all have sin. There have been things that were wrong. We knew they were wrong. We did them anyway. That destroys any chance we can have of a relationship with a perfectly righteous and holy God who, in order to be a just judge, has to see that justice is done for wrongdoing, and there's no possible way that we can satisfy that before a perfectly holy and righteous God. But that's why that's why he came, lived a sinless life. And his death on the cross was him taking your place. This is the exact, amazing, profound, ultimate opposite of the projection. This is him taking and satisfying justice for our sins, for our flaws, for our wrongdoings that were not his. But he does so in such a way that he takes our sinfulness, we take his righteousness, and we become fully forgiven, adopted children of God and his family. Listen, if that's you, just right where you sit, you just pray, say something like this. If you're here in person, or if you're watching online, God, I believe that Jesus Christ came and died and was resurrected so I could be forgiven and adopted as a child in your family. Please come into my life. Forgive me and adopt me. Begin to make me into the person you created me to be, and give me the life that you have for me. And we just prayed a prayer like that for the first time. It's not the words of the prayer that saves you. It's just that you put your faith in Jesus. God's grace comes to you through that faith, and you are a new spiritual creation, forgiven and adopted as a child of God. If you would, the best thing you can do is to not try and live this new life by yourself. We're created to need other people, and there are other people here for you who are for you. Will you, if you're here in person, go out to the point, that's just the corner in the lobby, let the person there know the decision you made. They'll take your information. We'll be able to follow up with you. Or if you're online, send us a message however you want, however you can. And we are so excited about what God is doing in the lives of so many people here in the community at Life Point Crossing. For the rest of us, I think this is a message that 100% relates to every single person, of course myself included. Will you commit right now between yourself and the Spirit of God that you're going to follow what Jesus says, that you don't want to be, you don't want to be the hypocrite that he calls out, but the difficulty is most of the time you don't even realize when you are. That makes it hard. Will you commit between yourself and the Spirit of God that you will be on high alert, that you will make a new habit and begin new ways of thinking in your dealings with people, known or unknown, the people you have conversations with or people that you'll never meet in the car behind you or strangers on the internet or on the news, it doesn't matter. That if you don't know if they don't tell you why they do or think or believe something, you're just going to either ask them or assume the best. Why do we want to be assuming the worst in people? It's not helpful for them. It's not healthy for us. It just makes things worse, and it is almost always unrighteous and wrong. Father, we ask by your Spirit that you would give each one of us here the strength and the courage and the consciousness to be treating people as we would want to be treated, to judge them as we would want them to be judged, as people who you love even when sometimes we struggle to. And we ask by your Spirit that you would increase our love for those around us and treat them as you have treated us. In the name of Jesus, amen.